The path of the Trailblaze is unique. Of course, it has to be to a certain extent, since it's the path for the main cast of Honkai Star Rail. I mean, narratively, what main character party doesn't have something special about them? But even then, the path itself is different from other paths. Akaveli was said to be the only Aeon to actually have connected with normal people. And in a bit of irony, it's also one of the paths that we know the least about. How did Akaveli fall? Who were the Emanators of the Trailblaze? Why does everyone just respect the Trailblaze? What even is the power of the Trailblaze? Though, to be fair, we don't really know much about the Trailblazer themselves. Why is the Trailblazer getting the gazes of so many Aeons? And who even are we? But what if I told you that this was all part of a plan? A plan to make the Trailblazer the next Aeon of the Trailblaze. Because the universe may need the Nameless soon, more than ever. So today we'll be doing a deep dive on the path of the Trailblaze, going over what it stands for, why it's unique, and why the Trailblazer might just become the next Aeon of the Trailblaze. But before that, do you guys like trying new snacks? Personally, I've always been into trying new foods and new snacks whenever I can, and a big help to that recently has been the sponsor for today's video, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co.'s mission is to give you the experience of Japan from the comfort of your home. Tokyo Treat is an exclusive monthly snack box packed with Japan's tastiest and craziest treats. Each month you'll get a rare Kit Kat flavor, limited edition chips, noodles, and the latest treats from Japan straight to you. I really like the box this time. It's supposed to be celebrating the Moon Festival, I believe. As always, we gotta start with a Kit Kat, and this time I've actually had this flavor before, and it's really good. Mont Blanc flavored Kit Kats. If you don't know what Mont Blanc is, it is a chestnut kind of cake. Oh, it's one of my favorite flavors of Kit Kat, honestly. This is actually pretty interesting to me. These are sweet potato wafer rolls. I like wafers, and I also like sweet potatoes, so naturally, this should probably be pretty good. Oh, you really taste sweet potato. It's so good. It's strong sweet potato flavor. It's not like a fake one too. It's like the real sweet potato flavor. Sakura Co is a monthly Japanese snack box that supports your local makers across Japan because, you know, support them small businesses, y'all. Each box is carefully curated with traditional and seasonal snacks like mochi, dorayaki, manju, and much more, including signature Japanese teas and exclusive homeware items, delivering an authentic taste of Japan to your home. All right, we're gonna try these tsukimi mikan cookies. I almost feel bad for eating it for how pretty it is. Look at that. These are really good cookies, man. You can really taste the citrus. And I think that cookie would go really well with my tsukimi gokukucha. It's a grain tea, I believe, which is great for me because I really like grain-based teas like rice and stuff like that. Yeah, it was like a really nice, like almost barley tea-ish quality to it, which is one of my favorite teas. Each box comes with a booklet that explains every snack in these boxes, as well as allergy information, because that's important, and gives fun facts about Japanese culture. Look, even before partnering with Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co, I have bought these boxes as gifts, and people absolutely love them. So if you or someone you care for want to try these amazing Japanese snacks from the comfort of home, click the link below and use code JORJOR at checkout to get $5 off of your Tokyo Treat or Sakura Co box. Thanks again to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co for sponsoring this video. Now back to the theory. Before we can go into the deep end about the Trailblazer, we first have to talk about what it actually means to follow the path of the Trailblaze. The Trailblaze mainly embodies two things: exploration and connection. Pathstriders of the Trailblaze must have a heart that yearns for adventure, and also the willingness to connect with all people. There is a flip side to this though. Being on an endless adventure obviously comes with risk. Any explorer will tell you adventures aren't safe. Throughout all of the Trailblaze's history, there have been countless deaths for immeasurable amount of reasons. Some are still unknown even after thousands of years. There was even an instance where the navigator and all the passengers just vanished one day for no known reason. I mean, if you just look at the Trailblaze missions alone, the main cast has probably been in danger more times than they've actually been safe. They would all probably be dead already if it wasn't for the fact that everyone just so happens to have hidden superpowers, which we'll talk about that later. And with that in mind, it makes sense that a lot of the Nameless that we know of were combat inclined and/or strategically capable. It's not just a preference, it's a necessity to survive. Also, an irony within a Trailblaze is that while there is endless adventures and when connecting with endless amounts of people, there is a constant theme of loneliness. Himiko's character story quest highlights this. She mentions that this journey is lonely. Even if all of her companions complete the journey with her, it's just a momentary fluke. To go on an endless adventure and to meet endless amounts of people also means there's never-ending goodbyes. There's no place and no person that is permanent, not even the Astral Express. They are free to disembark and settle down, but when on the path, there is no permanence. Even if there is a home to come back to, people change, people get older, connections are just lost. And that's probably why a lot of the passengers of the Astral Express are outlaws, nomads, and even sometimes rebels. There's 2 people on the Astral Express who literally don't have memories. All these people already don't have a home or people that understand them. It's also important to mention that not all Nameless or Pathstriders of the Trailblaze are members of the Astral Express. It's the only faction of the Trailblaze, especially now, but there are individuals who still follow the path. In fact, Baihang was technically a follower of the Trailblaze. Jingyuan even confirmed it in an express dialogue. She ventured across the Sea of Stars and wrote a famous travelogue that you can actually read. Views of the universe from a star skiff, the Xianzhou Zhuming. He even implies that she would have joined the Astral Express if given the opportunity. And no, this isn't just me coping for a playable Baihang. But it could happen. But it's possible. I mean, like, it really could happen. In terms of Akaveli themselves, we do know that they were originally from the isolated world of Pegina and built the Astral Express with the goal of expanding the known edges of the universe and trying to find the endpoint of the Tree of Existence. They were the Aeon closest to mankind. It was even said that they would regularly drink wine and share stories with them. This falls in line with the aspect of connection in the Trailblaze. As one of the key features of the Astral Express that gave the Nameless its fame is the silver rails that connected the galaxies. And yes, if you didn't know, the star rails in a Honkai Star Rail is an actual in-game thing. The paths that the Express laid down allows galaxies to interact, trade, and communicate with each other for better or worse. To further the point of connecting with diverse amounts of people as a part of the Trailblaze, the members of the Astral Express throughout all of its history are probably the most diverse group of people and species in any faction, probably second to the IPC though. That's more so due to the size of the IPC and the conquering they did. Within the Navigators alone, there were bounty hunters, criminals, singers, intellitrons, and even an actual capybara. I'm not kidding. They were actually one of the most intelligent ones too, and famously revised the Star Rail map that is still used till this day. So when are we getting a playable Capybara Star Rail? We don't know what caused Akaveli's fall. In fact, Herta mentions that the only being that would know is Noose, since they probably calculated it happening. And I personally don't have a theory about this yet because we just don't know enough to be able to theorize about it. But one thing I will say is I just don't think it was due to the Stellarons, because we do know that the Astral Express itself, which went on after Akaveli fall, stopped operations due to the Stellarons obstructing the silver rails, preventing it from running. That's actually why part of the mission of the modern Astral Express is to take on the duty of dealing with them. But if Akaveli fell due to Stellarons, it probably wouldn't be a mystery because the Astral Express also discontinued for that reason. Although, I will say that it might still have to do with Nanook, as it seems like they ascended around the same time that Akaveli fell, and to further that point, there is an image from the simulated universe that shows a kid from Adlevin, where Nanook is from, receiving an Astral Express badge, which might become important later depending on what Amphorius theories you subscribe to. Speaking of Amphorius, Herta mentioned in 3.3 that the Garden of Recollection needed the power of the Trailblaze to get to Amphorius, which of course begs the question, what is the actual power of the Trailblaze? I mentioned before that one of the key attributes of the Trailblaze, or maybe specifically the Astral Express, was that it had the ability to connect galaxies by laying down star rails that would allow anyone to utilize. Even after Akaveli's and the original Express's fall, pretty much every major faction still used the original silver rails to interact with galaxies and planets throughout the universe. Which brings up an interesting point that in the thousands of years that the Astral Express has been gone, no one has been able to come up with a better method of connecting galaxies. It's mentioned in the Glimpses into the Beyond readable in the Xianzhou that if Akaveli had never fallen, it would be hard to imagine what contact between planets would look like in the the modern era, which kind of implies that all routes that has ever been used even to the modern day between galaxies was laid by the Astral Express. The way I kind of think about it is that the silver rails are kind of like roads in the real world. But imagine if those roads can only be made by a specific group of people, and then they disappeared one day. Now everyone on Earth can only use the currently made roads, and there aren't going to be any new roads. And no matter how much society advances, the physical connections between cities and countries are stagnated. That's essentially what happened in the Honkai Star Rail universe when the Astral Express came to disrepair. There's also a very interesting point to be made that making the universe smaller isn't always a good thing. While there are many benefits to connecting with more people, history will tell you that whenever there are advances in travel, there are people who suffered for it, especially during colonialism. And it's not like Star Rail doesn't recognize this either. Jing Yuan even mentions in a voice line about the revival of the Astral Express that the renewed connections of all worlds is a good thing for the Alliance, but this may also allow, quote, fiends and demons once stranded in remote corners of the universe to spread their influence. And it would be interesting to see a Pathstrider the Trailblaze who is a bit morally crooked. Maybe even Oswaldo Schneider as an example, since we know that he claims to follow the Trailblaze but still destroyed Boot Hill's home world. Now, one thing you may be wondering is that if everyone has spaceships that can freely move, why would they need the silver rails outside of just navigation? They could theoretically just go anywhere, right? And this is where I think the key point of connecting galaxies comes in. See, I don't think the silver rails were simple navigation points. I think it actually allowed any vessel to warp jump. Warp jumping would really be the only way any ship would be able to travel galaxies and star systems in a reasonable amount of time. So what if warp jumping itself is the power of the Path of the Trailblaze and can only be used on the silver rails, allowing all ships to get to any destinations as long as it's on the silver rail? That might actually explain why every faction holds the Trailblaze in such high regards, because literally no one or path would be able to accomplish any of their goals without them. Even destruction. How else are you going to get to the thing that you need to destroy? And this power might be what Herta was referring to when she mentions that the garden needed the power of the Trailblaze to get to Amphorius, because there are no silver rails to Amphorius yet. So the garden couldn't actually physically get there without dying of old age. If memo keepers can die of old age, and if not, God knows how many years it would take floating in space to get there. Another thing to note is that the MC and Dan Heng in the rail car were able to get to Amphorius without going through Lycus and the Vortex. This may also be a power of the Trailblaze to break into any planet or galaxy going through any natural or unnatural borders. Even if the planet is a simulation, it doesn't matter as long as connections can be made. Hey, Future Jordan here. So I made this theory like way back in 3.3 and had to kind of put it in the back burner till just about now, just because of how many huge reveals was in 3.4 and 3.5 and still even now coming into 3.6. Now, in my opinion, I still think the theories and speculations in this video do still hold up, as it's more of like a general Star Rail topic rather than like an Amphorius specific one. But with that being said, throughout this whole entire video, I'm still going to pop in every so often to kind of add in some more relevant and currently new information. For example, with the idea that what may have allowed the Nameless to break into Amphorius, it is still technically possible that it's the power of the Trailblaze, but it is kind of hinted that has something to do with Evernight, granting permission or even possibly just March 7th awakening to her memories. As Amphorius itself has been confirmed to be a Memoria-based world, and Evernight is connected to the Remembrance, and on my personal speculations, possibly the Enigmata as well. It could honestly be a mix of multiple paths like the Remembrance and the Trailblaze, or even the Enigmata and the Trailblaze, because the Enigmata likes to mess with the eruditions, kind of the whole point of it existing. And Amphorius is a world of erudition made from Memoria, so it's kind of the perfect playground. But with that clarification said, back to the theory. Now that may cover the general powers of the Path of the Trailblaze, but what about its Pathstriders? It is confirmed that Pathstriders gain abilities from walking their respective paths. So what powers do the Pathstriders of the Trailblaze get? Well, considering that the Nameless is all about exploring unknown worlds and charting the sea of stars, I would imagine the Pathstriders of the Trailblaze would gain some abilities that would help with navigation and travel. At bare minimum, a better sense of direction. It's even possible that the Nameless might have an innate ability ability to read the stars, and possibly even an ability to always find their way to their end destination. I mention this because Himiko found the Astral Express while being completely lost, but followed a literal shooting star that guided her to the Express. She found her way, which might actually have been the power of the Trailblaze. I mean, if you think about it, the amount of crazy situations the main crew has been through is wild, but they have never been trapped. They have always found a way through. You can call it protagonist power, sure, but it might be interesting if there is an in-game explanation that those who follow the path of the Trailblaze will always find a path, unless there is none to be taken. And finally, there are space anchors, which yes, are actually canon to the story, as March 7th confirmed that space anchors are related to the path of the Trailblaze. They are all over the universe, in places that have been traveled to in the past by former Nameless, and might function as a smaller version of the Silver Rails for planets. We actually had to set them up in Amphorius since it's a place no Nameless has traveled to. It might be that they can only be utilized by Pathstriders of the Trailblaze, or can only be set up by those associated with the Trailblaze, since the anchors are confirmed to run on the power of the path. Now, that's not the only thing I have about the powers of the Pathstriders of the Trailblaze. Admittedly, a lot of what I said could be coincidental, but there is something very interesting that a lot of the members of the Nameless do share. They have ties to other paths. In just the current Astral Express, Dan Heng has ancestral ties to the Permanents, and you could make an argument that as Dan Feng was a member of the High Cloud Quintet, that he would also have followed the hunt. March 7th has been confirmed to have ties with the Remembrance, or depending on the theory you subscribe to, possibly the Enamata. Himiko was a scientist and had to be a successful one in order to rebuild the Astral Express. And again, depending on which theory you believe in, could be Poco Kakamon, or I thought she might be a former IPC head. And Weltz has a black hole in his cane, so do with that information as you will. And that's not counting the MC that has been gazed 4 times by different Aeons. Don't worry, I'll get to them in a second. But even throughout its history, there's a lot of other examples. Tiernan became a Galaxy Ranger and originally joined the Nameless because of a former navigator that definitely followed the hunt. Rosalina was a scholar trying to further her knowledge and expand her field of studies, which sounds a lot like erudition. Issy, a former navigator of the Astral Express, went on to found the Omen Vanguard, a faction dedicated to finality. And if you read through the history of the Nameless, the list kind of just goes on and on, which is odd because by definition, Pathstriders are supposed to dedicate their lives to a path. So it might just be that part of the powers of the Trailblaze is the ability to take on other paths. It may sound a bit weird at first, but it does actually make sense, especially with the Trailblaze, as the key principle of the path is to connect with others. And what better method to understand and connect with other people, worlds, and ideals than walking their path? The Trailblaze might actually be the only path that naturally allows its Pathstriders to walk other paths while still following the Trailblaze. And when you step back and think about the reasons people travel, yes, there's an aspect of enjoyment in seeing new places and meeting new people, but for a lot of people throughout history, there's the aspect of furthering one's goals. For example, I enjoy traveling to new places and meeting new people, but I also have a deep love for food. If you don't know, once upon a time I was actually training to be a chef, and while I did end up choosing not to pursue it, I still love cooking. So when I travel, I love eating new food, talking to chefs, learning about new cooking methods, new ingredients, how to understand different types of way of thinking about food. When I travel, I'm expanding my craft. Taking that back into the context of Star Rail, some members of the Nameless might be adventuring, exploring, and connecting to further their own craft or goals. And as long as their priority is still within the principles of the Trailblaze, they may take on other paths. This might actually be a good future explanation for when we get other forms for the crew of the Astral Express, because I guarantee you it's gonna happen. Star Rail definitely wants the main cast to always be relevant, not just in the story, but in gameplay as well. And I'm talking less about Imbiber de Lune, because that's more like revealing their hidden mysterious past, and more along the lines of March 7th Hunt form, where it's a member of the Express that learns and connects with the locals of a place they travel to. And I'm sure this will eventually apply to Himiko, Welt, and Danheng in the future regions of Star Rail. Hey, Future Jordan back here. Like I mentioned before, this video was made before Evernight and new Danheng form was announced, which ironically kind of does help this idea of what I mentioned about the nameless being the ones getting new forms. Now, I do want to clarify something, that I do think that non-nameless characters will also get new forms. We've already seen a couple examples with Tingyun and Fugue, and I'm fairly sure we'll see a masked full version of Sampo. But I do think the members of the nameless may be the only ones that gain new forms that aren't just about their mysterious past or a secret personality, like how you change forms with March and the Trailblazer. I think it would be a cool nod if the nameless would be able to get new forms from their new experiences as well as from their mysterious past. And for everyone else, is more of an exposed identity or their real identity. Regarding the topic of possessing multiple paths, I did some research and I found that it's been mentioned that people can follow multiple paths, but it's also extremely rare. There's an NPC in Penacony named Stefano that notices that the Trailblazer has multiple paths, and that he has seen something similar before from an Arbiter, which is a faction that follows the Equilibrium. Which is kind of interesting that there would be someone whose whole mission is to eliminate extreme radicalism in favor of balance, but be able to follow another path? There could be a few possibilities for this, one of which is the shades of the paths that Stefano saw in that person might be the balancing of two radical ideas since they follow the Equilibrium. There is also the aspect of someone unintentionally following a path while believing in another. This has been proven true with anyone within the Nihility, the Morning Actors, and to a certain extent you can even say Xander won himself. Now, on that same note, there's also the aspect of people who can follow multiple paths, but they can't be a Pathstrider of multiple paths. I explained this in more details in my Emanators video, but to kind of give a quick overview of the hierarchy of paths, there are followers who believe in a path but don't dedicate their whole lives to it. And Pathstriders are people who dedicate their whole being to a path and are granted powers from the path itself due to their dedication. I use the example of the difference between someone who goes to church every Sunday to a priest who's dedicated their lives to the church. So it could be that the only path that allows someone to become Pathstriders of multiple paths is the Trailblaze, which reflects their main mission: explore, understand, establish, and connect. And what better way to do that than literally walking the path of other people? Now, for the Lord Ravagers, a lot of them seem to have ties with other paths. Some are confirmed previous Pathstriders of the path they now oppose, but that is also the keynote. They no longer follow that path, and it has been confirmed that even Emanators can go back on their paths. They may even be able to retain the powers of their previous path, but the keynote here again is they gave up on their previous path. So it's still possible that the Trailblaze is the only one that allows one to be a Pathstrider of both the Trailblaze and another, if not even more than just that. Now, obviously this is speculation, but at minimum, I believe there has to be something about the Trailblaze that involves the connection with other paths, which I'll get into a little bit more later in this video when I'm talking about the Trailblazer becoming Pathstriders of multiple paths. So on that note, back to Past Jordan. Now, the last thing I want to talk about regarding the powers of the Pathstriders of the Trailblaze is what exactly would an Emanator of the Trailblaze look like? Or has there even been any? First and foremost, there hasn't been any confirmed Emanators of the Trailblaze, even throughout the history we know of. Though, to be fair, we only know of 2 Astral Express members that actually traveled with Akavili, which, according to the logs, have both served as navigator for the Astral Express during the fall of Akavili, which makes no sense. I'm not sure if this was an oversight from the world building team, or it was mentioned that the history fictionologist tampered a lot with Issi's logs. There is actually something very interesting to note about Dolly, specifically as she was so great of a singer that Akavili acknowledged her, which I guess could be considered a gaze from the Trailblaze. It might be hard to distinguish what an actual gaze is from Akavili since they always interacted with people. Though the main notable thing about Dolly is when Akavili fell, she suddenly started crystallizing with no explanation. Could be that she was an Emanator of the Trailblaze and Akavili opened up the powers of the path to her, and when he fell, so did she. Outside of Dolly, there's possibly Himiko, as she was guided to the Astral Express from a shooting star. Might not necessarily be an Emanator, but rather an example of how a path might select someone when an Aeon has fallen. Might be more equivalent to a gaze from a fallen Aeon. There's also something to be said about Himiko single-handedly fixing the Astral Express that runs solely on the path of Trailblaze. There's just something about Himiko that makes me feel like there's more to her than just a normal Pathstrider of the Trailblaze. And finally, I did mention this in my last last video about Emanators, that there's a solid chance that Pom-Pom is an Emanator of the Trailblaze. All we really know about Pom-Pom is that they've been the conductor for the Astro Express since Akavili has been around, and they can't leave the Astro Express. I personally believe that Pom-Pom is actually the spirit or the personification of the Astro Express itself. This is just due to the fact that Pom-Pom just appeared one day after Himiko fixed the Astro Express and holds the memory of every passenger. So the Astro Express itself might be the Emanator of the Trailblaze. And it's not a crazy thought. The Harmony's Emanators aren't really like living beings. They are just embodiments of Shippei and require a Pathstrider to carry out its mission of bringing peace. It's honestly more like a construct. And if that can be an Emanator, then the Astro Express being an Emanator is not a wild idea, as it is a construct of Akavili that carries out its will. So it's possible when Akavili opened the path of the Trailblaze to power the Astro Express, that might have made it an Emanator and made it sentient as well. And it created a body to communicate and connect with its passengers in the form of Pom-Pom. And the power to lay tracks that connect galaxies and warp jump would definitely be at the level of an Emanator, if not honestly more. It would definitely explain how the Astro Express is able to run on going on new destinations and laying down silver rails, because Emanators are powered by their paths, and laying out silver rails and making connections is how you would grow the path of the Trailblaze. That's the fuel. I mean, if you think about it, while Pom-Pom can't leave the Astro Express, they have probably traveled more than anyone else in the universe and connected with the most amount of people. In that way, you can say that he truly is the embodiment of the Trailblaze. But even among all of the nameless that I mentioned, there's one that stands out from the rest: the Trailblazer. If you were to ask any Honkai Star Rail player, what about the Trailblazer is different from any other known character in the game, they would all probably say they can switch between paths and /or they have been gazed upon by multiple eons. And this to me is the key to why I believe the Trailblazer will become an Aeon. By answering the question, why is the Trailblazer getting gazes from multiple eons? Getting a gaze from an Aeon is not easy. For many Pathstriders, it's their life goal. It's the equivalent of getting acknowledged by God. In fact, Ratio, who is undoubtedly intelligent, he's a member of the Council of Mundades, an organization within the Intelligentsia Guild that houses the most brilliant minds, worked with and acknowledged by multiple Genius Society members, but with all of that, never gotten the gaze of Noose. In fact, he's worked so hard on trying to earn a gaze with no results that he eventually gave up on it. Which does make me wonder how he might react when the Trailblazer does get gazed on by Noose before he does. But this does prove my point. It's not easy. So how did the Trailblazer get 4 gazes in the span of 2 years? Well, there might be more than one way to get the attention of an Aeon. The traditional method of excelling in your path to gain a gaze is pretty tough. But what if instead you were able to utilize an artifact that is connected to an Aeon? Or even better yet, further an Aeon's goal. Let's go through the examples of each time the Trailblazer received a gaze. In terms of Amphoreus, it's probably the most clear. Before receiving the gaze, the Trailblazer confronted their own past, and on top of that, they are connected to someone that is an important Pathstrider of the Remembrance, or possibly an Emanator. But more importantly, Foley's goal is to receive the memories of the universe, and Amphoreus, a place built from Memoria and considered a perfect example by those in the garden, has been out of their reach. No memo keeper has been able to get there to record those memories. So, fully recognizing the Trailblazer as a possible candidate, gazed upon them, granting them the powers of remembrance, and after that, the Trailblazer has been acting to a certain extent like a memo keeper. They literally record the memories of heroes in their book, as I've written, at the end of every Trailblaze mission. They technically even have a mimetic body while on Amphoreus. Hey, back here again for the final time. So the aspect of forcing an Aeon's attention by utilizing their goals was actually proven true in 3.4, with Cyrene and Finon's Eternal Recurrence, which utilized Foley's gaze, granting Cyrene the power of remembrance. And the concept of the MC being connected to an important Pathstrider could have actually been Cyrene. March as well, of course, as she was called the Child of Remembrance as well, even though, to be honest, Evernight kinda does look a bit more Enigmata, or even maybe one of those people that Black Swan mentions that are connected to Foley in a dangerous way, as strong as an Emanator. It's possible that she could be representing both paths, just due to how close the connections are between the the Remembrance and the Emanata. There's just no way for me to believe that Evernight/March has no connection to the Remembrance whatsoever. Even if it's just her previous path, she has to have something. There's just been too many hints for there to be nothing at all. Okay, that's the final Future Jordan. Now back to the theory. In terms of Penacony, it could be one of two things, if not both. One is simply to just stop the rebirth of the Order, considering that if that path came back, it may take over the Harmony. Shippei might have recognized that the Trailblazer was their best chance to ensure that the Harmony stays in Penacony and not fall to the Order. While Penacony is influential, it's also the home of one of Shippei's Emanators, Dominicus, and if they convert to the Order due to Sunday, then they can't do their job of spreading peace. In terms of Belobog, there's definitely the possibility that Klapoth could have used the Trailblazer to get rid of the Stellaron and the Destruction's influence on Relo 6. But what I think is more likely is that the Trailblazer was compatible with the Architect's Lance. It has been confirmed that the Lance itself holds the power of the Preservation, and I've seen some people that suggest that the Lance itself may have been made in a similar way to the Cornerstones. And if that's true, then Alicia Rand, who built the Lance, might have been a Pathstrider of Preservation that was recognized by Klapoth. And as such, the Lance might be an artifact that has a deep connection with the Preservation. So when it became compatible with the MC, Klapoth might have taken notice. There's also something to be said that all the previously mentioned gazes were on planets that have been affected by the Destruction. So they may see the Trailblazer as someone who can get rid of the Destruction's influence, since beyond any other path, the Destruction basically ruins their goals. Which brings up the final one, the Destruction, which I believe is solely because the Stellaron is in the MC's body. When it interacted with an attack from the Antimatter Legion, it forced a gaze from Nanook, as Stellarons originate from the Destruction. And from here, I think we need to talk about the people that put a Stellaron in the Trailblazer, because that will answer the main question of this video. How and why will the Trailblazer become an Aeon? We know that Elio and the Stellaron Hunters planted the Stellaron in the Trailblazer's body, but why? Why go through the trouble of doing something so crazy and honestly weird? I think it's because he needed the Trailblazer to gain the gaze of Nanook, and the Stellaron was a way to force it to happen. It might also have actually helped force all the other gazes as well, as Stellarons are a special life form that tethers themselves to a certain path or Aeon and responds to the desires of a world. So theoretically, as a Trailblazer travels throughout the universe, each planet they go to, the local path will tether itself to the Stellaron, and the desires of the Pathstriders within that planet will be collected by the MC, and thus may make it easier for the Trailblazer to gain the attention of the Aeon that is influencing said planet. But why does Elio want the Trailblazer to gain the gazes of multiple Aeons? It's probably because Elio, through his premonitions, found a method for how a new Aeon of the Trailblaze can ascend, and that is to gain the gaze of every Aeon. Because as we discussed throughout the whole entire explanation of the Trailblaze, the principles of the path is to explore and connect with the goal to connect all worlds. And the ultimate form of connection is to walk every type of path a person can take, thus understanding every type of person. In that way, they have connected with everyone. And outside of being an Emanator, the ultimate form of acknowledgement for a Pathstrider is the gaze of an Aeon. This is the reason the Trailblazer is gaining the gaze of all the Aeons. It was a plan made by Elio to create the next Aeon of the Trailblaze. This is probably why the Trailblazer's memories were wiped. The Astral Express has always taken in people that don't know where to go, and thus creating the situation that the MC would become a nameless. Now, of course, the question stands. Why would Elio want to revive the Trailblaze? Because he probably foresaw the future that needed the Aeon of Trailblaze once more, for an event that has already been hinted to happen, the War Among Aeons. He probably saw that this would end the universe, and thus found the best method to ensure its survival, the rebirth of the Trailblaze. Because it might just be that the only being in the universe that can understand and connect Aeons and paths is the one being that has walked every path. And that's the theory for today. If you made it this far in this video, thank you so much for watching. As always, leave your own thoughts and theories in the comments below. I always love reading them, whether you agree with me or not. With all of that being said, peace.